In the short 2020 season, Mike Yastrzemski looked to take a huge step forward and emerge as a star player for the Giants. I wrote an article about it. In The Athletic, they wrote an article about it, about how he looked like a star and he was in the MVP conversation, but then he came crashing down to earth quite a bit in 2021. So what's in store for Yaz in 2022? We'll get to that question and so many others on today's Mailbag Locked On Giants.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide episodes 3 days a week until the lockout ends, then back to 5 days a week, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available on all platforms, including YouTube as well, so check us out there if you have not already. And coming up on today's show, we're going to dip into some mailbag questions. Thank you so much to everyone who asked questions on Twitter. First question comes from Brian, who asks, will Mike Yastrzemski bounce back or continue to become less relevant to the team? So, good question, and one that is going to have a lot to say about how the Giants season goes. It is worth pointing out, I mean, he was looking like the most important player on the team coming into 2021, and then he had a mediocre year, and they still won 107 games. So that speaks to the depth around Mike Yastrzemski, and he was an important part of that, despite the fact that the performance was down, as you said. And of course, the 2020 season was 60 games, and Yastremski played in 54 of them, and he was a monster. I mean, in that first half of the season, meaning the first month of the season, he looked like he was going to possibly win the MVP award, and he kind of, I wouldn't say he tailed off, but he cooled off a little bit, and so he didn't end up winning the award, but he got some votes. And then in 2021, it was roughly a league average performance by Yaz. And so the question is, what do we expect moving forward? And so actually, I was thinking about Yastremski anyway. There was an article just a couple days ago by Andy Baggerly in The Athletic in which he interviewed Mike Yastrzemski. And Yaz, I mean, he talked about a lot of things, but I'll just go straight to one of the bigger points that I took away from that, which is that he admitted that when he got hit by a pitch on the last day of spring training, do you remember that? He got hit by Sean Manaea in the hand on the last day of spring training. He actually swung at the pitch, and he said it was up near his face, and he was kind of reacting to it, just trying to get out of the way / I mean, I've done that too. You kind of sometimes, to protect your face, you kind of put your hands in front of your face, and that seemed to be a little bit what happened. But anyway, he admitted that messed him up psychologically, and he just didn't feel comfortable in the box for a lot of the year, especially to start the year. And I remember his at-bats in Seattle to start the season were just terrible. He looked like he was completely pulling off the ball, and he didn't look right. And there were questions about his health, but he was saying he was fine. And turns out it may have been a psychological factor, and that is something that the numbers don't always show, right? How you're feeling psychologically in the box. But he said that the time off to reset, he's hopeful that it's able to translate into him being just kind of resetting and being more comfortable coming into 2022. And he also mentioned that he's working with like ultra high velocity pitching machines, which is kind of a modern training technique. You just crank up the machine as high as it will go. And also he said he's working with extreme curveballs, the likes of which don't even exist. Humans can't even throw such wicked curveballs. But he's training with these because that's, again, it's like a modern technique so that when you get into the game, you've actually trained at even beyond game speed so that the speed of the real game is a little bit slower and actually maybe it feels a little easier to you because of how you've been training. So anyway, he's doing everything he can. He can't specifically work with the major league coaches during the lockout, which hurts him and any other major league player right now. But because of those factors, I feel like he's trending up in my book a little bit. I would kind of bet on him to possibly have a rebound season. But I think what we saw in 2021 is kind of a floor, and that floor is not bad. I mean, he's a powerful hitter. He hit 25 home runs for the Giants despite it being a down year. On base percentage was below average at .311. Very good outfield defender, though, and a good base runner as well. So all told, he's a solid major leaguer as a floor, I think. Obviously, there were some stretches where he was really, really struggling and chasing and all that. But, he has the upside of what we saw in 2020. He can be really good. I do believe that pitchers did kind of seem to figure out how to attack him. But he said in this interview, if you have a chance to read it, I would highly encourage that I mean, he was kind of out of his rhythm, and he was trying to do too much, and he was, I don't know, a lot of it is cliche, and it's easier said than done to fix a lot of these issues. But it did seem like pitchers found a way to attack him. Basically, high fastballs was a big part of it. Although he did, I think, at the end of the day, punish fastballs overall and then struggled against everything else. And actually, yeah, I have that pulled up here. His weighted on base average against fastballs was .391, which is well above average production. Against breaking balls, .229. Against off-speed pitches like changeups, .280. So I say that, but at the end of the day, I mean, he did well against fastballs, and just I think sliders were his main undoing. So anyway, I'm going deep into the weeds here. I would kind of bank on league average to slightly above league average offense with the possibility that he rebounds in a serious way and gets to being in that 15, 20, 25% above league average territory. I still think there's a possibility of that. 2022 is going to be an important year to see which way his career is going to trend, because as you said, it is a possibility that he trends towards becoming less and less relevant to the Giants, and he is going to be 31, 32 this season, so he's not getting any younger. So anyway, I think at the very least he's a useful strong side of a platoon player who plays good defense as well, and there's the possibility for better than that. So coming up next, we're going to talk about if I think there's a chance the Giants could pick up Evan Longoria's 2023 option. I do believe it's actually more likely than you might think. So stay tuned for that. But first, it's that time of year that I've pretty much given up on all of my New Year's resolutions. But not this year. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like it's not really a resolution because I actually enjoy eating them. Have you tried the Puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. They are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, they're not just a protein bar, they're a treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. Now, I know that sounds delicious, but you might be thinking, how does this go hand in hand with my resolution to be healthier? Well, most Built Bars contain just 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and a whopping 17 grams of protein. Go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure the often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning? Is your Odyssey an LX or an EX? And wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry. You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Why choose to spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the exact same parts from a chain store or car dealership? Random example, a Honda Odyssey fuel pump is $353 from a chain store and just $216 from Rock Auto. You can order the part from Rock Auto and have the dealership install it and save a bunch of money that way instead of using the more expensive, they're just going to charge you more even if it's the exact same price, and there's no need for that. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices. All the parts your car will ever need, rockauto.com. All right, here we go. We're going to get to more mailbag questions. The next question comes from Doug Hayes, who says, thoughts on Evan Longoria having a big year and having his $13 million club option picked up in 2023. I think there's a real possibility. Before we get to that, I do just want to say Locked On MLB Prospects host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. That show is free and available wherever you get podcasts. Thanks for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Make that show your second listen every day. How about that? So anyway, getting to the question about Evan Longoria. Yeah, I actually touched on this the other day. It is a closer call than people might think. So I broke this down. So he's got a $19.7 million contract for 2022, but Tampa Bay is paying $5 million. So actually, it's just a $14.7 million contract that the Giants are paying this year. And then for 2023, yes, there is a $13 million club option, but it has a $5 million buyout, making it effectively an $8 million decision. And that is a semi-reasonable number, especially when you look at the season that Evan Longoria just had. It was a strong year that was interrupted by that shoulder injury, right? It was a shoulder when he collided with Brandon Crawford in that really bizarre play, a ground ball between them, and they ran into each other in the ninth inning. I think it was against the Dodgers. Might have been the Cubs or something. Anyway, it doesn't matter who they were playing, does it? But anyway, if you look at the numbers, I mean, he had a 351 on base, had a 221 isolated power, 23% above average offense by weighted runs created plus, 1.7 Fangraphs wins above replacement in just 81 games. So obviously, if you multiply that by 2, it's 3.4 wins above replacement as a pace that he was on. And if he had done that, I mean, he's not playing 162 games, and it assumes that he keeps up the production, which you can't assume either of those things. But I'm just saying the production was good when he was on the field. And so it's not a bad thought that he has a similar year and maybe over more games in 2022. And perhaps they do want to pick up that option at a very reasonable $8 million decision. I know it's a $13 million club option, but $5 million buyout on a $13 million club option is kind of hefty. It's a hefty percentage of the potential salary. So anyway, all of that to say, I don't think it's going to happen because I mean, mostly it is due to the fact that he has just not done well against right-handed pitching in his time with the San Francisco Giants. And basically, I think he has only 1 year in the last, since 2014, he just has barely had any seasons where he was above average against right-handed pitching. And so I kind of view him as the weak side of a platoon guy. I know that he adds value defensively, but given the fact that he's going to be 36 years old for all of 2022 and the Giants have him under contract, there's nothing they can do about that. But you'd be paying $8 million for Longoria to play in his age 37 season when you're assuming continued decline. We may see more signs of decline in 2022. I think I may have misspoken about a year in there somewhere. 2023 would be the option they would be picking up, and he would be 37 throughout the whole season. He would turn 37 in October, so he'd be pushing 38 during the season in 2023. The fact that it's only $8 million makes it somewhat more reasonable. But think about, Wilmer Flores. He's kind of a weak side of a platoon player, and they're paying him, like $3 million per season, and he's younger and maybe even possibly a little bit better against left-handed pitching. they're obviously different players, and they're paying Wilmer Flores $3.5 million. It was a 3-year, $9.5 million deal when all was said and done for Flores, and he's entering the last year of that. So I think $8 million as the decision point is too much given the age, but it depends. I mean, if he has a monster season, then they might just pick that up, and it would be one of those surprising things that we didn't see coming, much like Buster Posey. We thought they were just going to ride that contract out because he was looking like he was in decline, as with Brandon Crawford, as with Brandon Belt, but they all turned it around, and those players became players they wanted to bring back. And so it's not hard to see Longoria falling into that category if he can continue to improve like we saw serious signs of in 2022. So it is not, or 2021. So it's not a foregone conclusion at all that he's just gone after 2022, but I would definitely lean towards that he will be. But we'll see. Next question comes from Joseph Andrew Bart Enthusiast. I love the enthusiasm there. Who asks, is Camilo Doval the ninth inning guy to start the season? And I'm going to say yes. The way that he finished out the year and the way that he was clearly the top choice for Gabe Kapler and the staff to close out games, why the heck not? I mean, he was absolutely dominant. I would say there's certainly a chance, like say spring training rolls around and Camilo Doval just completely wild, can't find his release point, can't throw strikes. He has minor league options. They would not hesitate to just start him in the minor leagues, and it might even allow them to keep other players that they would otherwise lose by using the options on players who have options. But if Doval shows that he's in the form of anything like he was to finish out the year, then why the heck not? I mean, he was overpowering. He looked like one of the best relievers in the game for that stretch. Wasn't he reliever of the month for the month of September? I mean, he was dominant. And then into October, I know he ended up giving up the game-winning runs against the game-losing runs against the Dodgers in that final game. But I don't have to tell you, he was just so dynamite. So the Giants have quietly kind of built a cheap and flexible bullpen. They're not locked into anybody in any role. Like I'm saying, Doval could be a dominant closer, or he could start the year in the minors. It's all kind of up in the air and possible given the flexibility that they have with this pen. But I would just lean towards him starting the year in that same role because of how good he looked. And then it slots McGee down a little bit. It slots Tyler Rogers down a little bit. And I think suddenly it's a pretty darn strong back end of the bullpen. And so I look forward to that. The bullpen led the majors in earned run average at 2.99. And they kind of did it with a ragtag group. No stars, no high paid players. And yet they led the majors in bullpen ERA. So anyway, coming up next, more questions and answers. We're going to talk about who is the fifth starter going to be and the opening day outfield. So stay tuned for that. But first, football might be over for this season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props, to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC. How about baseball as well? Right now, and when it gets going again, we're going to have tons of action at BetOnline.net that you can bet on for baseball. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, here we go. We are going to get to more questions. The next question comes from K2 Persuasion, who asks, who's the fifth starter? So this is a loaded question. I don't know if you mean right now or to open the year. I'll answer both. Right now, I continue to slot Tyler Beede into that role. And actually, I mean, I feel like that's a crazy answer. And the only reason I'm doing that is because he's out of minor league options. But he has something to prove in spring. If he can't throw strikes, then there's no way that they would just slot him into that role, because he spent a lot of time in the minor leagues in 2021. He came back from his Tommy John rehab and was ready to reappear in professional baseball, and he was just out of control with command. I mean, literally out of control. His walk rate was 18.4%. He walked 8.32 batters per 9 innings. That's just about one walk every single inning in 16 starts. Way too high. It's more than 2 times too high. Like if your walk rate is 9.2%, which would be 18.4 divided by 2, that's still a worse than league average walk rate. And so he was just completely out of control. 6.66 ERA, 6.89 fielding independent pitching, 6.89 expected fielding independent pitching. Basically, a high 6s ERA, and it was earned, is what I'm trying to say. That's what he deserved based on the performance. You just can't walk that many people. Way too many free base runners. So anyway, how am I slotting him into the 5th starters role? Well, I guess I'm not. He's really got something to prove. But the fact is, he's out of minor league options. And when he finished up the 2019 season, he was looking dominant. In his last start, he looked dominant. In spring training 2020, before the COVID shutdown, he looked dominant. And so I don't think they just want to give up on him, but they can't send him to the minors. And so if he has a spring where he proves he can throw the ball in the strike zone, then I think they'll ultimately sign somebody, and that would push, one of these 3 guys who I view as kind of mid-rotation starters, DeSclafani, Wood, and Cobb. One of them would potentially be pushed down to be your 5th starter. If you add, if you make a trade for Sonny Gray and you go Logan Webb, Sonny Gray, Alex Wood, Anthony DeSclafani, Alex Cobb, as an example. So I think the most likely scenario is that one of DeSclafani, Wood, and Cobb ends up in that 5th spot. Who it would be, let's just base it on the contract. All 3 of those guys signed new deals with the Giants this year. Cobb receiving the least amount of money per season at $10 million, right? $10 million per year, or is it 9? I don't know. He's receiving the least amount of money among those 3 on a per season basis. Yeah, $9 million per year. DeSclafani, $12 million. Wood, $12.5. But DeSclafani gets 3 years. Wood gets 2. Cobb gets 2 plus an option. So they're all different structures. But anyway, I think I'll say Alex Cobb is the guy who goes on the 5th day for the Giants to start out the season. Tyler Beede maybe in a hybrid kind of bullpen role. And if he really struggles with command, perhaps he gets dealt in a deal for Sonny Gray as an example. So I don't know, but I think that we have to keep in mind that he's out of options, and that might force him to be on this roster, even if that performance was so dreadful in the minors in 2021. But also keep in mind, I think they're definitely going to add someone to the rotation, at least one, and that would push those veterans back, and one of them would take that 5th spot, and I'll go with Cobb. So the final question comes from Masters Gaming, who asks, starting outfield best guess. And this is a tough one. I know Colbert on Twitter tried to answer this, and I agree with what Colbert was saying. It depends on who they're playing. It depends on the handedness of the pitcher. Like, they have a different team if it's a lefty or if it's a righty. Currently, the Giants are set to open the season against the San Diego Padres, in which case they'd be facing a righty, probably Joe Musgrove, could be Yu Darvish. Blake Snell's not going to start opening day. So assuming it's a right-handed pitcher, I think you're going to see LaMonte Wade Jr. in left. I think you'll see, gosh, it's hard. As it is now, you'd probably be looking at Steven Duggar, who's also out of options. It's the same exact kind of story as Beede. Might force him to be on that opening day team. Or maybe they trade Beede and Duggar in a deal for Sonny Gray. I think that starts to make some sense for both sides in a way. But currently, it would be looking like Wade in left, Duggar in center, and Yastremski in right. But I do believe they'll add an outfielder and maybe an everyday right-handed hitting outfielder like Seiya Suzuki who could play in right, in which case you might have Wade in left, Yastremski in center, and Suzuki in right. Why not? Let's just go with that. And then if it was a left-handed pitcher on the mound, say it was Blake Snell for some reason, I think you would have Austin Slater in center. This is where it gets a little tough. Do you have Darren Ruff in left and Suzuki in right? Yeah. And then you've got a DH, and maybe your DH is like Wilmer Flores or something. So a lot of interchangeable parts, but I'll go with that. Wade, Yaz, Seiya Suzuki. How about that? Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On MLB. Paul Francis Sullivan, please call him Sully, brings you his unique perspective on the majors past and present. That show is free and available wherever you get podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. Also liking, commenting, subscribing on YouTube, all of that good stuff. So thank you in advance, and thank you to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again next week. We'll give you the latest on the lockout. Major League Baseball has said that if there's not an agreement by Monday, then regular season games are going to start to be canceled. It's not really their call to do that. Like the season start date and all that is negotiable here, but it's kind of a threat. And so we'll be back next week with all kinds of updates on what's going on with the lockout. Anyway, thanks again for listening. Really hope you enjoyed today's show. Stay locked on Giants.